You can access the entire episode now on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Now let's talk about some of this folklore that you are trying to remind people of and capture, starting with the different mythical creatures that have been passed down that people still talk about and even have experiences with. And there's one on the list you sent me that I've never heard of, and that's the Grunch monster. Tell us about what this is.
For sure. And even in the Louisiana Dread horror anthology series, these monsters get their own episode, and you learn the lore through watching the episode, and then you get to see this abomination. Well, essentially, the Grunch. There's two places that people say that the Grunch originates from. One's a place called Mons on the river, and based on my research, that's not as provable as in New Orleans East. It was a place called the Grunch Road. It's right off of Reed Boulevard now in New Orleans East. But go all the way back. This is like late 1800s, early 1900s. And they used to have traveling circus, a lot more than like Barnum and Bailey's that they do now. I think it's only one thing that people go, and it's a watered down version of what it used to be, for good reason. I'm sure they like abuse the animals and all that kind of stuff, but that's not even the point here. But these traveling circuses would go around the country, but they kind of faltered in popularity towards the late 18 to early 1900s. Now, the animals themselves go into zoos, or they go into like little sanctuaries, or euthanized, unfortunately. The lead performers, they go on to do like vaudeville acts and stuff throughout in the big cities. But there's another section of the circus that was used as sideshow performers, or what most people derogatorily say they call them freaks. It's just people with circus freaks. You know, they made a whole season of American Horror Story on that exact thing. Yeah. It's just people with birth defects or deformities, conjoined twins, all this kind of stuff. And they had a very difficult time adjusting to life after the circuses would basically go bankrupt. But they would be in these big cities, and people would harass them. They would abuse them, throw things at them, things like that. And sooner or later, they all kind of got together, and they just left the big cities. Well, the one in New Orleans specifically would go to New Orleans East. It's all wooded area, heavily dense woods and swamps. Again, it's all before it all kind of was developed the way it is today. Now it's completely all developed in that area, but back in the day, it was just all trees and swamp. And they lived in a little community out there, but people would actively go out of their way outside the city and start abusing these people, just throwing rocks at them, you know, harassing these people. And this is where the story kind of deviates. There's basically two versions of this, but they both convene at the end to make this monster. So there's one instance that says that these sideshow performers lived in their little community, and they would just interbreed until this creature was born. Yeah. And it would protect the ones that are left, and eventually they all died out and stuff. Now the other version says that these creatures, or sorry, these sideshow performers used to pray to God to help them, but these people just kept getting harassed, so they altered and they started calling out to the devil to help them. And the devil showed up, and he said, in exchange for your souls, I will protect you. You'll live a long life, but when you die, you're mine. But I'll protect you in this life. They all signed an agreement, and this thing called the Grunch was formed, and it was taken from the earth. It is half goat, half man, and it is a beast of about 6 feet tall. And essentially it just feasted on anyone who would go out and to harass the sideshow performers. Now, crazy thing is, obviously it's like old Bigfoot footage, right? But it was footage that someone captured and claimed to have seen the Grunch right after Hurricane Katrina. And that was the last sighting of the Grunch monster, because it's still pretty, wooded and swamp, like a little bit past Little Woods. If you're looking at a map, I'm looking at one right now. You could tell it's very swampy and stuff. But that's where they claim that the Grunch monster resided to after all these sideshow performers passed away.
That's interesting. And all these creatures you're describing, the Grunch, Bigfoot, even Rougarou, are very similar in certain ways. So it's possible that a lot of this folklore, some of these creatures may actually have been witnessed, and it may be the same thing, just witnessed through different lenses and perspectives, right?
Absolutely. And like even the Rougarou, it's something that existed. These stories existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's a lycanthrope. And if I may, I could go into a bit of the Rougarou itself.
Yeah, of course.
That is the pilot episode of the Louisiana Dread horror series, is the Rougarou, and how this lore kind of came about. But the Rougarou essentially is a lycanthrope, which is a werewolf. But unlike the werewolf, it is more of a shapeshifter. It mostly turns into a wolf-like creature, but it could be anything. It's a human that is basically cursed. And at night is when they transform into a beast with superhuman strength and agility, and it's just this wolf-like creature. But during the day, this person who is cursed is a very feeble and weak individual. They're very vulnerable during the day, but every night they'll turn into this creature, this beast. Now, there's several ways that you can turn into one. One of the most popular ones is that if you break your Lenten penance for 7 years in a row, you will turn into one. So, right, it's just a way to keep your Catholic life. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to turn into this thing. A voodoo priestess, or what we call a traiteur, can put this curse on you, because again, it is a curse. People say, oh, I'd love to be a Rougarou. No, it's an awful life, because during the day you are sickly and ill and miserable, and then at night you turn this like to the super beast, but you have a bloodlust. You have this, it's insatiable type of thing. Now, you turn into a Rougarou through a curse, but unlike many of you can't kill it with a silver bullet. It's not like your typical werewolf. The only ways to kill it are decapitating it or setting it on fire. The only two ways to get rid of it. But one way to protect yourself from it is at night. All your listeners out there, if you think that there's a Rougarou coming at you, I'm here to tell you, the only way to protect yourself is at night. You put 13 coins or 13 chicken bones, anything, but it has to be 13, out on your doorstep, because this thing cannot count to 13. As funny as that may sound, it only knows 1 to 12. So when it sees another object, it gets confused and it doesn't know how to count to that 13. So it restarts. It starts from 1 again. And essentially, it just keeps doing that until the sun comes up and it has to leave and then turn back into the feeble old person. Yeah. Now, one crazy thing, Chris, that I found doing this research is that this has been going on, obviously, like I said, for centuries. And it's the thing is that whenever the Cajuns, the Acadians in eastern Canada, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, all that, for those of you who are listening who aren't aware, there was something called the Grand Dérangement, which is the great migration of people, as they say. But it was a genocide. The English were genocidal towards these French speakers in Canada, and they took these people and displaced them. But others in Canada, it was through starvation, violence, mass graves, all this kind of stuff would occur. But during that quote-unquote Great Migration, a feeble, weak old man got on the boat.